Hello, and welcome to Lawless Conversations with Katie. I'm Katie, your host. This podcast goes through various difficult subjects such as abortion, gun control, prison systems, or gender, to name a few, and dives into all different aspects of the arguments that might be offered or discussed. At the moment, we are wading our way through the subject of abortion, and today we're going to talk about Planned Parenthood. Although I have spent a lot of time and effort into researching these topics, I am by no means an expert on this subject or any other subject I will explore in the future. So take my thoughts with a grain of salt, and of course, if you have any questions or things to add, please share them. I try my best to keep my own biases out of these explorations, and because I'm talking about many aspects of a subject, including opposing ideas and arguments, know that these are not necessarily ideas that I subscribe to or hold personally. I will, however, explore different arguments as if I do believe in them in order to truly explore all facets of this subject. Finally, because these are difficult subjects, there will be some content that is hard to hear and might be triggering. Please understand I am not looking to insult anyone, but to explore these subjects openly and honestly. I don't want to convince anyone to think like me. I want to convince people to think, period. So without further ado, come have a lawless conversation with me. Planned Parenthood is the face of abortion at this point and the subject of many a controversial conversation. One aspect of Planned Parenthood that has been debated and discussed is the percentage of its services that are abortion in relation to their other services provided and rendered. Those who say that Planned Parenthood is just about abortion are often retorted with some version of listing all the other things they do for women, especially low-income women, such as cancer screening, contraceptives, and more. There are also some discussions about the funding that Planned Parenthood receives from the government and the efforts through these discussions to take that funding away. I want to take a moment today to talk about these aspects of abortion as the varying sides of it are fascinating and so very polarizing. First of all, there were two statistics presented. Pro-life people stated that abortion was 96% of the services provided, and pro-choice people say that abortion is only 3% of the services provided. Right off the bat, the extreme gap in these statistics should make anyone suspicious of both of them. There are obvious manipulations in the numbers that are meant to create a particular narrative for both sides. I referenced the articles that talk about this, two that express the extremes of both sides, and one that sits in the middle of the road and looks more critically at the numbers, caveats, and issues with both claims. First of all, you have an article from Human Life International that states the statistic of 96%. It gets the information for this number from a clear source, but does not explain how they got to that number. The second article is from factcheck.org. This article shows where that 96% statistic comes from. It is derived from, quote, adding together the numbers Planned Parenthood did provide for its abortion procedures, which was 327,653, prenatal services, which is 18,684, and adoption referrals, which is 1,880, and then divides the number of abortions by the cumulative of all three numbers, which would be 348,217. The pro-choice article then does some different math by adding all the singular services that Planned Parenthood offers and dividing that by the number of abortions conducted in that year. And you can probably guess it came out to 3%. Both of these articles choose specific ways to use math to their own gain, and with any amount of critical thinking, one can see this. I'll digress here for a moment because I am a nerd, and I love looking at the way words are used to create a feeling or used towards a rhetorical purpose. In the Human Life article, there is very strong and precise language such as preborn, lives, committed abortions, abortionists, pro-abortionists, and abortion mills. They refer to abortion in general as the broken bodies of millions of innocent preborn children, which is misleading at best. But I have already addressed this in the Sunday episode on conception. It even compares the number of abortions to the mass genocides conducted in the past by people like Stalin, Hitler, and Mao. The fact check article does similar things by having an overall judgmental tone and feeling of idiocy towards the opposing argument, even though the language used is milder and less directly crafted to create outrage or emotional response. These articles are obviously meant for particular audiences. Neither one of these authors mean to work towards a middle ground or even try and find perspective beyond their own. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. The beauty of free speech is that people of staunch opposing views can share their thoughts, and the consumer is able to find all sides and make up their own mind, albeit not many people take the time to look beyond their own thoughts and conduct such research. The third article is from the Washington Post. This article does a great job of looking at the claims of both the 96% and the 3% statistics, and pointing out the inconsistencies and number manipulation that is being done. It states that limiting the number to the three aspects, abortion procedures, prenatal services, and adoption referrals, is just as unreliable as splitting every service one receives into singular services. The author points out that the numbers are shaky at best since the collection of information of women who are pregnant or receiving certain services is scarce. By the end of the article, they come to a conclusion of about 14% of Planned Parenthood services being abortion, but make it clear that it's pretty much impossible to find solid numbers on this because of the limitations in data collection. Looking into these articles was challenging, but in the end, a fun exercise in research and critical thinking. Lastly, I want to take a look at the finances and government funding of Planned Parenthood. For these numbers, I use two different sources. The first one is from All-American Life League. This is another one of those sites that used very specific language and blatant manipulation of the numbers in one case to make the abortions look larger than they actually are. If you read the article, post on my social media and tell me if you find the statistic I'm talking about. But beyond these issues, there is good information about the general funding of Planned Parenthood. Obviously, the revenue of Planned Parenthood is staggering and a cause to take a moment and consider. The revenue in the 2020 and 2021 fiscal year was $1.714 billion. In this sense, I'm led to the concept of if the services provided by Planned Parenthood should be related to a money-making process. Essentially, I'm led to ask, should abortion be a profitable business? Albeit, not everything Planned Parenthood does is abortion. I think many people would come to the conclusion that it most certainly should not be, just the same as there is a financial incentive to treat a symptom rather than treating a cause. Making abortion a profitable field of work can create an incentive to encourage abortions over other choices, which should never be the case. If you have different thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. Moving on from the revenue, the ratio of donations to government grants and reimbursements was surprising. Donations from that same fiscal year period were $579.3 million, and the government-related funds were $633.4 million. That is a difference of $54.1 million. Obviously, that is still a huge sum of money, don't get me wrong. But the things I have heard about the funding of Planned Parenthood made me think that most of the services were funded through the government and that they would not function without it. While government funding is a huge part of the money in Planned Parenthood, and likely is what causes it to be available to low-income women, Planned Parenthood would certainly be able to function without government assistance. I really have no purpose in pointing this out, except to say it's very helpful when you find the information yourself rather than taking anyone's word for it. You might be surprised. Lastly, the second article on the money side of Planned Parenthood is from the Heritage Foundation. This article gives a variety of graphs looking at the use of funds throughout the years, as well as the revenue, donations, and government-related contributions. This article leans more towards the accepting side of Planned Parenthood and the services they provide. One interesting statement that I had not considered was the explanation the author gave for why contraceptive services had been steadily going down. The uptick in longer-term contraceptives like the IUD and the injection mean that women do not need to return for contraceptive needs for 2, 3, and sometimes 5 years. While I'm sure that is not the whole story, it was an addition to my perspective that I had never considered. Planned Parenthood is a wrinkle in the tapestry of the abortion discussion, and I really have no opinion to place on their practice, but I enjoyed learning about these aspects of the company, and I hope you did too. If you are interested in commenting about this episode or answering any of the questions I just asked, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS@yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at Lawless Convos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next Wednesday as I talk about the concept of taking men out of the abortion discussion altogether and some of the issues that might come with that. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward to next week.